My name is Louis Joseph Grappo, a.k.a. Joseph L. Grappo.
And where were you born at?
I was born in East Palestine, Ohio, February 28th, 1933.
And
Parents of immigrants,
where would they immigrant from?
Italy.
Oh. Any siblings?
11
siblings?
siblings.
Are you oldest, middle, youngest?
I'm the youngest.
Out of all 11, you're the
Yes.
baby.
Well, there's 12 kids, but I'm the 12th one.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow. All right, so I'm looking here and it says that you enlisted. What were you doing? What made you decide to enlist? What led you up to that?
My parents died. My mother died when I was 4. My father died when I was 7. So I was raised from brothers and sisters. They'd take turns. And so by the time I was 15, I wasn't too happy about, and all my brothers, all of my brothers served in the military. All 5 of my brothers were in the World War II. So I always would have liked to join too. Mm-hmm. So I falsified my baptismal certificate and went to work trying to enlist first in the Marine Corps. They knew I was underage. They didn't let me, and so I went to the Army and recruiter, and they accepted me. And that same day, I was off to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky.
Same day?
Yes, for 101st Airborne. At that time, it wasn't a jump school or anything. It was mm-hmm. just 101st Airborne.
Do you remember what day this was, or what month, what year?
August 26th.
August 26th was the day that you enlisted.
Yeah.
And the day that you went
yes.
to camp.
Mm-hmm.
What year was this?
1948.
1948. Wow. Were you going to school at the time that you decided to enlist?
Yeah, well, it was during the summer vacation.
Mm.
I was a freshman in high school.
Freshman, and yeah, you definitely falsified your information, didn't you? All right, so you enlisted and you went to camp. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I enlisted there, I went through basic training, mm-hmm. Finished basic training, and went back home on leave. When my leave was up, I went to Seattle, Washington, processing overseas to Japan. I had enlisted for 3 years, and arrived in Japan sometime in December, the latter part of December.
Of what year? Of
1950.
1950?
I'm sorry, 1948. And sent to Japan. I was assigned to the 1st Cavalry. And then transferred to the 7th Division when they vacated Korea, and was stationed in northern Japan. Was assigned to Rifle Company, A Company, 32nd Infantry, 7th Division. And we didn't have a heavy mortar company, so they started one, and they took soldiers from various companies, and so I went to heavy mortar company, and that's where I spent the rest of my Army life, was there.
Can you explain a little bit about what your job was? What was your responsibility?
Yeah, I was a first gunner on the mortars.
What does that mean?
I was the guy that put the shell down the barrel, and then it explodes, it shoots off, and had to sight it in. Mm-hmm. Had to do the sighting in on it, and from commands from the command center. That's what I did the whole time.
So, were you stationed in Japan the entire time, or did you have to go over to Korea at any point?
No, I was stationed at Camp Hagen, up in Honshu, North Honshu. And then later on we were moved down to the 7th Division Artillery was. We were the only infantry company there. And from there is when we went, started our process to go to Korea when the war broke out.
What did you think about that? Were you nervous? I mean, had you heard of Korea?
Pardon?
Had you heard of Korea prior to finding out about the war?
Never heard of Korea.
Had no idea where it was?
No. I remember hearing it on the radio there at the barracks. Had no idea where it was, and we started getting ready to start the process of going to Korea. And so we ended up at several camps. We ended up at, strangely enough, at the same camp where the 1st Cavalry was, where I was stationed originally, and we were barracked there. We were the only ones in the whole camp because it was the 1st Cavalry already went to Korea. And I ended up, then we loaded on transports and ended up going for the Incheon invasion.
Were you nervous at all?
Yes. I wasn't extremely scared because I didn't really know
what you're getting yourself into.
What I was going to be scared of.
Yeah.
And so then we proceeded to Japan for the invasion on September 17th, 1950.
The invasion to Japan or Korea?
Invasion to Korea. And we landed behind the Marines.
In Incheon?
In Incheon. And then the next day we moved up to the main line of defense and proceeded to make our way to Seoul. And the Army was assigned to the east side of Seoul, and we ended up, the rifle companies, I think we took that area. And after that was over, fortunately I didn't get, we had some wounded, but nobody was killed there that I'm aware of. But then we went by convoy through Daegu and down to Busan, and we bivouacked there on the beach at Busan, waiting for the invasion up in the Iwan invasion, and but they had a clear mind, so we were delayed in going. So finally we went up there and we landed, and there was no resistance. We went ashore there, and then by train we went down to Hamhung, and we arrived in Hamhung. I remember someone got into the North Korean banks there, and they had tons of money flying all over the place.
What?
And I got a fistful of it, and all the North Koreans were selling us apples. We hadn't had fruit in.
North Koreans were selling you apples?
Yes, the civilians,
Okay.
And so then we start heading up to the Chosin Reservoir. Chosin was the Japanese name for it. Changjin is the Korean name, I believe. And so we proceeded up to relieve the Marines on the east side of the Chosin Reservoir. And we hadn't ran into any resistance. The Chinese were supposed to, not enter the war, and North Korean Army was defeated. So we felt good about that, and we were going to advance up to the Yalu River. But we stopped for overnight and along the way, and my battalion was the 1st Battalion, 32nd Infantry, and we went up farthest north for the rest of the two battalions were there, partial battalions, and the rest of them set up around the 7th Division Artillery, and we went up by ourselves further up north about 2 miles or 2-3 miles. And went to, you couldn't dig a foxhole because the ground was solid and it was, you know, in the 30s, 30 below zero.
Mm-hmm.
So I crawled into my sleeping bag like everybody else did and tried to go to sleep, and all of a sudden there's tons of Chinamans attacked us. And of course the bullets were flying everywhere, and you were shocked. You didn't know, you know, get out of the sleeping bag. There was no place to hide, to protect yourself. And what had happened is the Chinese patrol first came in to the command center, and they came to the commander center. They were challenged, what I understand, and they asked them, the guys there, they challenged them. They said, "Are you Americans?" And they said, they heard a voice say, "Hell yeah, we're Americans." 5 minutes later, that whole CP-10 officers and some sergeants were in there, and they were all killed, and that's when it started. And so...
Had they been watching you guys? Did they know that you were camping out there, or did they just kind of stumble across you?
No, they were playing. They were attacking everybody at that same time, all along, because our 17th Infantry Regiment had reached the Youre River.
How many people were there at the time?
At that time was just our company, the Heavy Mortar Company, was up that far.
Mm-hmm.
All the rest of the companies, rifle companies, were down where the artillery was.
And about how many people are in a company?
I think it's 170, if I remember.
About 170?
Right. Something like that. I don't really remember how many. But anyway, when it happened, when it first started, I heard this explosion, and I looked up out of my sleeping bag, and there was a recoilless rifle that was sitting on the side of the road on the hill, and that thing just exploded. They must have somehow blew it up. And we retreated the next day. Our 3/4-ton truck wouldn't start, so we had to leave it behind, and we had to proceed by walking back to where we were going to set up with the artillery.
So they attacked you guys in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And they didn't take any prisoners. They just left y'all be.
Well, there's a lot of guys got killed that night, and then when daylight come, they stopped. So we retreated back. There was some rifle companies below us, because the 1st Battalion, 31st Infantry Regiment was there, along with the 1st Battalion, 32nd Infantry Regiment. And our commander was Lieutenant Colonel Don Faith, and the 17th Infantry Regiment Battalion Commander, who was over all of us. He was the senior officer. And as he was trying to get across to the artillery, he was captured and killed by the Chinese. So under a lot of fire, we all had it was like a gauntlet we had to run through alongside the reservoir, and then cross down over where there was a creek that fed into the reservoir. And bullets were ricocheting off the water, and I thought that for sure we were going to get hit, but we didn't. And we then got to the artillery, and you could just see pockets of dead Chinese where the artillery had fired direct at them, and a lot of those guys still in their sleeping bags, dead. They never even got out of their sleeping bags. And so then we went and set up our mortars, dug a defensive emplacement that was deep, below the level of the ground, and set our mortars up there. And we stayed there during that night. They attacked us again. There was 2 Chinese divisions attacked our 2 battalions. And of course a lot of guys got killed then too. And fortunately, only this guy's name was Morgan. He was part of our then, our mortar, and he got shot through the leg, through the captain's leg. I don't know how it happened because we're down in the the gun emplacement. But anyway, he got shot, and then I ended up taking him to the first aid station, which I don't remember, but I located him after the war, well, way after the war, and at the Korean War Memorial dedication, and he told me that I was the one that carried him to the first aid station. I didn't remember. He said, "Yeah, Grappo, you saved my life. You put the tourniquet around my arm." I said, "I don't remember. I kind of remember putting the tourniquet around your arm and you getting shot. I remember all that, but I don't remember taking you there." He said, "Yeah, man, you took me to that." I said, "Wow, that was nice to know."
Yeah,
So
he remembered you.
Yeah, oh yeah. And so then we proceeded. Then that next day we were ordered to retreat back to the Marines, which was, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles we had to travel, and for some reason we started late in the afternoon, and it gets dark at 5 o'clock there in the winter time in North. So it was still daylight when we were trying to escape back to the Marines, and fighter planes came in and were strafing ahead of us, and one of them dropped a napalm bomb in front of our column, and it killed some of the guys. I could feel the heat back from where I was at, but it wasn't. But some of the guys got killed there by friendly fire, and so we proceeded. There was a bridge was knocked out. It was probably 20, maybe 10 yards long,
Mm-hmm.
and the Chinese had blown it. And to get up to the other side, you had to go down a big embankment over kind of a slushy, swamp-like thing. And then we had to go back up the hill back to the road to get back on the road. And we had some half tracks with twin 40 millimeter cannons, and then quad 50 caliber machine guns. We had 2 of them. They were able to pull the trucks that got stuck in the muck there, and then they ran out of gas. I went in and climbed up on the other side, and I went atop this hill, and there was probably maybe 30 of us at the top of the hill, including our battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Don Faith. And what they had done, the Chinese had made a roadblock at the bottom of that hill, around the curve of that hill. So our battalion commander, got us, and it was just like in the movies, charge. We started down the hill, and there was me and a guy named Lopez who only went with the colonel, and he turned around and went back up and got them all together and said, we're going to do this. So we got down to where the roadblock was, and I ran into one of the guys who was still alive from that. They sent 3 tanks up there and the ambulances, and the Chinese killed them all, wiped them out. And one of the tanks had turned over, and it was blocking the road. So they finally, when they were, got all the guys that can get up there on the road and back in trucks, now there was starting to be a lot of wounded.
How many people survived that attack?
Well, the whole thing, by the time we went down after everybody got up there, we started down the road again.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were at a little bridge was out over a creek, so we had to get up on top of the railroad tracks all the trucks, and they rode those railroad tracks. Of course, all the wounded were, just terrible pain, and you couldn't put any more wounded on the trucks. They had them strapped to the headlight guards and the hoods, and the trucks were just completely packed. You couldn't with dead and wounded. So I was with standing behind the first first truck, and we stopped all of a sudden, went down this road, and we heard someone say help. And first we didn't know. It might have been Chinese for all we knew. So, but anyway.
Or a track or something.
Yeah, some guys went down offside the road. It was Lieutenant Colonel Faith. He had been wounded. How he ever got out ahead of us, I don't know. But he did, and he had already gotten wounded when we made the charge to the roadblock. He threw a hand grenade and bounced off a tree, and he caught some of the shrapnel. And so they brought him up and put him in the cab of that first truck, and I was hanging onto the back of it because my feet were frozen, my hands were frozen. I hadn't been wounded yet.
Mm-hmm. And about what time of year was this?
Pardon?
What time of year was this? What month?
That was December.
December of
1950.
1950. Okay.
Well, it was November. I'm sorry. It all started in November. It ended in December. Then I was flew out on December 1st, but. So it was at the end of November. And so then this driver, instead of him coming off the track after they got past the creek, he come off the track, instead of going real slow and waiting for the rest of the trucks and the troops to follow, he didn't take off fast, but enough to get about 100 yards ahead of everybody. Mm-hmm. And of course they were waiting for us. And we're going along, it was nice and peaceful, and all of a sudden it was the 4th of July. And immediately, as soon as they had it bracketed in, which means they had already fired mortars, made sure they had the right sights and everything. I didn't find that out till after I was captured. But anyway, I took off running back to the rest of the troops, and an officer, said something to me, and I don't remember exactly what it was, and I says, so he formed a skirmish line. I was alongside the railroad tracks. I was on the last guy on the right side, and we proceeded forward, and all of a sudden I got shot through the leg, and it went through thank God it went right through the center of my leg, between the tibia and the other bone there that's on your leg. It didn't hit the bone, fortunately. And so then there was no room on the trucks to put me on. I was going to just be left there. Like a lot of guys were left behind that were wounded because there was no room to trucks to put them on.
And they said they were going to come back for you guys? Or
no, there was no way to come back. There's no way to come back.
So it was like you got to figure it out yourself?
You were gone. If you got to the point there were so many dead and wounded on the trucks that there was no more room to put anybody on. You couldn't help anybody. It was a terrible experience, to see these guys begging for you
to take them, and they're just being left behind.
Yeah, and they were walking wounded too. And so anyway, after I got shot in the leg, my platoon leader happened to be close by, and a couple of guys from my platoon picked me up and carried me back to the trucks. But there was no room, so I was hanging on the side of the truck. And I knew the truck driver, his name was Bunny, he had it written on his truck. And I hollered out for if somebody knew me on the truck, and this one guy, he did know me. I won't mention his name, but he wasn't wounded. And I said, "Are you wounded?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, get out of the truck and let me get in there in that space." And so he kind of didn't want to go, and the driver pulled out his .45 and pointed at him and said, "Get out of the truck or you'll have a reason to be in there." So he got out. Thank God I took his place. I was able to get up in there. And so we traveling, going a few, I don't know what happened after that really. All I know is I was sitting down in the truck with my back up against the side, and I got shot through my shoulder here.
Came through the truck and hit you?
Pardon?
A bullet came through the truck and hit you?
Yeah, because on those 2.5 ton trucks, they have these wooden slats that go, you know, and then I got hit through my shoulder and my neck, and I reached back on my neck and I could feel a lot of, you know, I got blood all over. I was holding back on my shoulder. And so, I was doing some heavy praying. You know, I was born and raised a Catholic, and I was praying like you wouldn't believe, and I made a pact with God that if I lived, if I survived this, He let me live, that I'd go to Mass and Communion every day for 6 months. And a year, I said a year, and then I says, no, God, I know I wouldn't do it for a year, but I'd do it for 6 months. I says, no, God, I'm bullshit. I'd do it for 6 months. So the next thing I knew, the Chinese were all over us. I ended up I laid down, put my helmet over my face so they wouldn't see my breath. I put a hand grenade underneath my chest, and I took my watch off and my wallet, and I put it underneath because I knew they would come and search you, and then they would find out I was alive. But they didn't, and I pulled this, one guy had got shot right through the head and his bones were sticking out of his temple. I pulled him over top of me. So when the Chinese came into the truck, and to them it appeared everybody was dead. I was the only one alive in that truck. Everybody
About
else
how
was
many
dead.
people were in the truck?
Gosh, I would just have to take a guess at probably 20, 25, 30. I don't know.
And about how many people were traveling with you, like walking? How many trucks? How many people?
I don't know how many trucks there was that were able to get up over that hill, but I don't know how many were behind me and how many guys were walking, but there were plenty walking.
So you're in the truck, and then there's this war going on outside. And did anybody make it that was outside? Did they start capturing people at this point?
Well, at that point, when daylight came, they came down. By that time, everybody was either dead or wounded. And so one of the trucks was on fire. I don't know whether they set it on fire. I raised up enough to look through the slats in the side of the truck, and I could see all these guys that looked like a campground. There were so many dead was laying on the ground. And of course the Chinese, I could hear them speaking, and talking and going on. And then, finally I just set up, and nobody came to the inside the truck. They were all over the place. But they, three young, really young, they looked like they were 15 years old to me. They looked like, they crawled up into the truck and looked at me, and I showed them my wounds, and they got back out. They didn't shoot me or nothing, thank God. And so I sat there.
Why do you think that is, that they didn't?
I think they were young kids. They really, they weren't, hardened yet.
And that was common to kind of see as young kids.
Well, not necessarily, because I saw those three, and that was, the ones that I really remember seeing. I remember looking out through the slats, and there was a GI that was, one of the soldiers was stark naked, walking across this frozen snow and ice. I looked at that, and I said, my God, what did he do? What did they do to him? I was sitting there just hoping that maybe the Marines would rescue us. And I looked out across the reservoir. I could see, the Marines. I mean, they were just, you could hardly see them, but they were there. And I could see a big line up like that. And then some fighter planes came in, and the Chinese didn't guard us. They guarded us from a hill. And up there in Korea, they had these hills that were just maybe 20 feet high at the top. And then he came down and it was all flat then from out to the reservoir and everything. And so they were guarding us from up there. And Corsairs come in and strafed him, and they came so low you could see the pilot. He wasn't more than maybe 50 feet in the air. So they were that, I mean, you could see, but and their cartridges were falling all around you. You could see them. And so they left. And so I said, well, geez, I think they'll be able to come in here and rescue us with helicopters or whatever. And so I waited, and here comes another sortie of fighter planes that afternoon. And they came in and started strafing that hill, and it was just starting to get dark. It wasn't dark yet. So I had made up my mind that if I couldn't make it another day, that I know I'd freeze to death that night. Mm-hmm. So I crawled out of the truck and I picked up a M1, I think it was an M1, and a Chinese rifle that was brand new, had never been fired. It still had a cap on the head because Chinese took American weapons. You know, but I don't know how it got there and why it had never been fired, but it wasn't just an ordinary rifle. It was deluxe. You know, stock on it was all finished real nice and lacquered. Wow. And so I used it. I picked it up and took it with me, and a grenade I took with me. And I got out of the truck, and my best friend Gerald Miller was laying on the ground next to me. And on his night, when I was in there, he called my name. He called me, Grapes. I said, who is it? He says, Jerry. God, I looked out over the side, and there he was, laying on his back, and I freaked out. I got some sleeping bags off the dead guys, and threw two of them over there, and there was some North Koreans that were trying to escape with us, and so they were helping the wounded. Really? Yeah, they were helping the wounded. And of course, there was no water. We didn't have water because everything was frozen. Our canteens, everybody was. But anyway, they were doing their best, and I hollered at one of them. He come over, and he rolled Jerry over on top of one and covered him with the other. And that was North Korean that did that. So then... How many North Koreans were helping out that tried to escape? Yeah, I couldn't tell you exactly. Was that kind of like a sight that you were kind of surprised to see? And yeah, well, it wasn't nothing surprised yet by that time. You were sure about surviving. But anyways, I got out of the truck and I went around to Jerry, and he was dead. I told him, Jerry, I just tried to believe that he was still alive, but I told him, I'll send somebody back for you. And I was really upset over that, and I took off over top of the railroad tracks. If you didn't go over those railroad tracks, they wouldn't shoot you. Mm-hmm. But if you went over that railroad track to escape out to the Marines, then they'd open up on you. Anyway, well, the last sortie come in, and that's when I took off, thank God. Where was Jerry from? He was from Milwaukee. His name was Gerald, with a G, Gerald Miller, from Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. And rewind real quick, if you had to guess probably how many wounded and dead soldiers that you guys were carrying on these trucks and trying to take back, how many would you probably guess that y'all were carrying? The only thing I can tell you is at one of our reunions, Colonel Jones, and he's a retired colonel now, he was the either executive officer in our battalion or company commander, I don't remember. But anyway, at one of the reunions, we talked, and he told me when they got back down to South Korea, he started up the battalion with 7 guys. That's all. So everybody else was either dead or wounded. Gosh. Or had taken off to the Marines, you know. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to walk into the trap, so they just probably, exited out to the reservoir, because the Marines picked up a lot of the guys over the next 2 days. But anyway, they picked, by the time I got there, it had already just started dark. And a Marine Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel Olin Bill, he was a transportation officer for the 5th Marines. He picked me up and carried me back to a 3/4 ton truck, and they put me in that and took me back to where the Marines were set up with their hospital tents. And then they put me out, they let me down and with all the dead guys. They did what do you call it? Where they picked the
triage.
Triage, yeah, they did. So they put me out to say, well, I was there. Man, I was cold, freezing, and I was going into hypothermia. I was shaking so bad. And so I started screaming as loud as I could, and finally some guys come out and they got me, took me into the tent, and the medical doctor was there, and they cut my clothes off. I wrapped myself around this heater that they had in the tent, just couldn't stop shaking. And so that the daylight came, they put me on a plane and flew me to Ham Hung, and then from Ham Hung they flew me to 395th Station Hospital in Japan, in Nagoya, Japan. And I stayed there until they ended up sending me back to the States, and I got for discharge.
You said earlier that you were captured.
Yeah, I was captured for 12 hours. You know, after I got shot, you know, that was it. The truck, all the trucks were stopped.
It's about 12 hours.
Yeah, so about 12 hours.
And the only ones that knew that you were alive were those boys that came in and just happened to spot you in the truck. Everyone else thought you were dead.
Well, yeah, yeah, everybody thought I was dead. But outside there, you looked out, there was hundreds of guys just laying on the ground dead. And of course trucks, one of the trucks, you could still see it burning. And then I couldn't see back the rest of the trucks but anybody who didn't run and escape were dead. So I wasn't, you know, officially I wasn't classified as a POW because I wasn't in a camp or anything. So, but
you were taken over.
Yeah.
So.
But hadn't I took off, I would have never survived the night. I would have, just no way I would have survived. I would have froze to death right there. So.
How many battles would you say that you were in total? Were you engaged in?
Well, the one that wasn't too fierce was when we went into Seoul, and that wasn't too fierce. I mean, a lot of the rifle company, some of the rifle company guys got killed and wounded. But then, really, it was at the reservoir when I really witnessed a real war, to where you were then. You were so angry then at that time, you know, that now they're trying some of the soldiers over in Iraq and that for murdering these prisoners.
So.
But I'll tell you one thing, after going through what I went through, if someone had gave me a gun and told me to kill 100 of them, I would have done it. That's a state of mind, and that's why I'm so against them trying these guys, because they don't know what happens to a human being when they experience all that. People getting killed and blown apart, and their friends dying, and that turns you into somebody else that you never were before. So, you know, I went through the hospital there and ran in a friend of mine he got wounded in Seoul, and he was a cook, so he was cooking there at the hospital while he was still being treated for his wounds. Mike DiMaria, he was from Philadelphia. And so they released me from the hospital, and I ended up going to Tokyo and waiting for my orders to be shipped back to Korea. But the orders came and said to send me back to the States. And I thank God for that. And so there's, you know, a lot of experiences in that time, you know, that went on, and I could tell you about. I remember going over when we were surrounded there, going over to there was an old house there, or shed or house or whatever, and they were set up there, the command post, and I got up out of my you know, that gun emplacement and walked over there, and you could see every now and then a puff of snow would bounce up where they were still sniping us from the hill, you know. And it was, when they first attacked us, and I remember peeking my head up, and it looked like raindrops hitting the snow. That's how many bullets were flying at us. And it was, you didn't dare, if you dare stuck your head up, you were dead. That's how, you know, when you had two divisions shooting at you, that's a lot of guns. And boy, I tell you, that was a scary thing, you know, especially Morgan when he got hit. I said, yeah, this is really for real stuff here now, you know, might not survive this. And I remember walking down, you know, being able to walk during the daytime, walking around. You're still vulnerable, but you still did it. And they had a row, they lined up all the dead guys in a row, maybe 2-3 rows, you know. And I walked down that and seen all those guys. And one guy had the half of his head blown off. I'll never forget that. This whole part of his head was gone. And I looked at that, I said, oh my God. And I know I smoked then. And one of the guys gave me a pack of cigarettes, and he took off one of the dead guys. And I lit up that cigarette, and it had the taste of that decaying death. I was so mad at that guy. Of course, he didn't know, I guess.
Yeah.
But, you know, there was a lot of different things like that went on. And
were you mainly with other American soldiers, or were you
we had
any...
Korean soldiers with us too.
Mm-hmm.
We had one. They assigned one to each of us.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And my rock he was young. He was a young kid, probably 17 or 18, and he was brave. He wasn't. Even though he was a young kid, we was on guard duty one night, and you know, we thought we heard some North Koreans. This was before the North Koreans were, you know, up ahead of us, and we heard this noise, so we crawled up there and peeked over the hill, and thank God it was American guys that were making all the noise. But he was willing to go with me to, if they were there, we were going to, you know, which was a dumb thing for me to do, but.
So going through that sort of experience, how does it make you feel knowing that it was called a police action?
Yeah, that infuriated me always, even to this day. But it was, you know, when I came home, my brother met me at Fort Mason in San Francisco, because he was a lawyer, and he was a treasury agent at the time. He lived in Oakland, and he came over and met me at the ship, and then they took me out to Camp Stoneman. I think that was at Camp Stoneman, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it was. And he drove out there, and he talked, and they put me in a barracks with a company commander or whatever. He was an officer. And my brother asked me, he says, could you give him a pass to come home and spend the weekend with us? And he said, sure. So my brother took me, and the first time I saw a television set. It's crazy. And my gosh, I was, you know, I didn't realize it at the time, but for many, many years after that, I was a mess, and I didn't know it. I thought I was, well, that's normal. And I didn't realize it until years and years later that I was really a mess.
Did you speak about your experience at all with your family? Did you tell anybody about it?
Yeah, for some reason, it didn't affect me like some guys didn't want to talk about it. And of course, you know, when you take 10,000 soldiers, you're lucky if you'll find 500 or 1,000 that were in combat. Majority of the guys never see combat. And so I was willing to talk about it. And then I didn't go around boasting about it and so on, but I did. My parents, my brothers and sisters all wanted to know, and while I was there at my brother's house, oh no, that was later on. Gerald Miller's family came out to California because I ended up moving to California, and they came out, and my brother lived in this big house, nice house, and he had this library, and the whole family was there, and of course their family did not want to believe he was dead because it was missing in action, at that time. So I don't know whether it was one of his brother-in-law or who it was, but anyway, we went into that study alone while his family stayed outside there. And he asked me about Jerry, and I says, he's dead. He says, are you sure he's dead? I said, absolutely sure he's dead. There's no way he's alive. Believe me, he's dead. He's gone. And he says, well, the family doesn't want to believe that. And I says, well, I'm telling you, and you can do what you want, but that what you think is best. But Jerry is gone. I told him the story where he's laying on the truck. And so, because they know we were really good friends, so so anyway.
How old was Jerry?
He was probably 18, maybe 18, nice looking kid, short, real athletic, and I was too. I boxed for the 32nd Infantry Regiment. We tried to, baseball and stuff, but he was really athletic kid and really nice, really good, clean cut guy. He wasn't one of these rough guys, which there were a lot of them, and so, my time in the service, I was young. It was adventurous.
Do you recall how much you were getting paid for combat?
Yeah.
How much were you getting paid?
Well, we got $90 a month.
Was that enough for you to kind of take care of what you need to take care of?
Well, when we were out, it was never enough, but I was fortunate.
Especially for what you were doing.
Yeah, I was fortunate on my 16th birthday. We were still at that first cavalry camp, that I first went to. And it was my birthday, so all my friends were going to go. We were going to go up to the beer hall, and they had a restaurant there too. And I says, "Well, it's my birthday. I'm gonna come up there and buy you guys a little bunch of beer,
I keep forgetting you were only 15, 16.
Yeah. And I says, so I took my wallet with me, and I went into the shower room, and the guys were shooting dice in the shower room. And so I said, well, I'll get in here for a little bit. I won $1,800.
Hey.
That
That was a payday.
That was a payday for 2 years, really.
Yeah.
So I went up to they said, Grappo, you come up there and you're broke. We're not giving you can forget it, you can get nothing.
You're still too young to gamble.
Yeah. So
you won their money.
Yeah, so I go up to the beer hall, and I walk in. I act real sad, I says, oh shit. I says, I lost all my money. Well, that's tough, Grappo. I reached in my pocket and I threw this money up and all over the table.
Oh my goodness.
They freaked out.
So that was probably one of your more pleasant memories.
Yeah, and everybody drank and everything. In fact, I even went up to the PX and bought a scooter.
Hey.
a Japanese scooter. It was called a Rabbit, which I left behind there. But I don't know why I bought it, but I did. It was like $100 or something.
Yeah, I
like
mean,
that.
you were able to afford it at that point.
But I sent all the money home, so I was fortunate. And later on in my days in the Army, I won a lot of money gambling. For some reason, I don't know. One time I won $2,500. So anyway, that was pretty much, I got home, and through the years, it was, again, I didn't think I had a problem, but I did have a problem.
What do you think is the legacy carried on by the Korean War veterans in the Korean War? Like, what is their legacy?
Well, I think maybe in the beginning, the guys probably didn't have any feeling one way or the other than, what are we doing here? We never heard of Korea, and so, they were fighting for their lives. I don't know whether, they realized what they were fighting for. I think they were just fighting to save each other, to save your life, really.
Yeah.
But later on, then it changed as we got older and matured and understood, what life was about and how the rest of the world was. And between, at that time, you're in high school or just out of high school, you don't know what's going on in the world like you do today. Kids know everything. I mean, they watch the news, they watch, computer. But then later on, I became, because I made several trips back to Korea after the war as a merchant seaman. And so I always used to go to Incheon and Seoul. Incheon and Busan.
How was it kind of seeing Korea develop after the war? Was it?
Yeah, well, it hadn't developed yet because that was during the 50s and early 60s.
Okay, so it was right after.
Yeah,
so they
hadn't done it.
Yeah, still trying to recover.
But I have some pictures I'm going to give to Chuck, and one of them is the Sears and Roebuck store.
My grandfather worked for
But wait a
Sears
minute.
Roebuck.
It wasn't Sears and Roebuck, but they had this big sign painted, Sears and Roebuck. And they sold everything and anything you wanted. So I got that picture, and I thought that was incredible. Here already they were ready to get out and make some money.
Yep. So, in your opinion, why do you think the Korean War is often referred to as the Forgotten War?
Well,
What gave it that title?
Yeah, I don't think, there was, America was just, it was after World War II, everybody was doing well. People were going to school, all the veterans got out, all of them, were recognized and got married, and they were living happy. I mean, that was a good time. America's industrial growth was going crazy, and everybody had jobs, and that little Korean War over there, that was, that going on, that Korean action, it wasn't Europe, it wasn't Japan, it was, it was some country that people in America didn't even know about and didn't understand any reason other than they were trying to stop the communists. They're going around and living a really good life over there because of the sacrifices that were made to save their country. And American kids should know that too. I don't know, they have programs like that over in Korea, because I'm sure, the young kids in Korea, I don't know whether they get schooled or not on that. I'm sure they do. I mean, I don't,
Right.
Yeah, but
Well, I hope you get the chance to go back to Korea and kind of see how it's developed since you've been there. It's definitely grown, so.
Have you been there?
Yes, I went last June.
Oh,
so I got to spend a week there, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
So,
That's
but
something.
I would like to thank you so much for coming in and talking
Okay.
to me today. Really appreciate it. And
Okay,
it was
thank you.
so
Nice.
great to meet you, and I hope that your grandkids will be able to join us in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.